My pleasure to welcome our next guest, Dr. Harvey Castro. Dr. Castro is a distinguished physician, entrepreneur, and healthcare innovator with a passion for improving patient care through cutting-edge technology. Throughout his career, Harvey has founded multiple healthcare startups, including Deep Think Health and iMobile Health Mission, focusing on areas such as AI-driven clinical decision support, digital health, and emergency medicine. As an author of several books and a leader in the healthcare innovation space, he's dedicated his time and expertise to transforming the future of healthcare for all of us. Dr. Castro's wealth of knowledge and experiences in both medicine and entrepreneurship make him an ideal guest for our podcast, as he often finds himself at the forefront of healthcare innovation. So without further ado, let's dive into our conversation with Dr. Harvey Castro. Welcome.
Welcome, everyone. And thanks, everyone, for coming. And hey, both you guys, thank you so much for having me. Honestly, this is an honor to be here. So I appreciate it.
And we're so happy to have you. So I think we'll just get started with what really inspired you to pursue a career in medicine in the first place, and how did you ultimately choose emergency medicine as your specialty?
Take a little pause there and sigh. All goes back to my upbringing. I grew up with basically nothing, and that's not an excuse for what I'm about to say, but I think just not having access to healthcare, not having anything, opened my eyes to the need for healthcare. And it really created this spark and passion to help others. And I know that sounds very cliche-ish, but sincerely, that was the opening moment that I thought, I have a really horrible scar here on my left hand. And it's a reminder, typical idiot teenager that I was running around hitting parking signs. And one of them was someone was trying to steal them and then left. They couldn't get it out, but left a Sharpie edge. So when I went to hit it, I came down and slashed my hand open pretty bad, bleeding. I was about 12, went to the emergency room, and I'll never forget, they didn't use anesthetic. I felt every stitch. The doctor said that they couldn't use anesthetic for, I don't know why. I wish I could go back and look at my medical records and see who this guy is to have a conversation with them. And I just remember waiting in the ER forever and thinking this is a horrible experience, and thinking, I don't want this for my patients. I want to be that person that's different. And so I know that's a little long-winded, but that's what got me into ER ultimately, because I thought I want to be that person. The other part of it is I have an octopus brain. I'm everywhere. I'm the mad scientist. And I think ER was perfect for me because I get to learn every discipline. Obviously not to the point of a cardiologist, but just enough to save lives and be effective and then learn everything.
Very interesting. You've really had an incredible career so far, stemming from your time in emergency medicine. I've actually heard some wild stories about working in the ER. My dad was an ER nurse for like 20 years. And so I know you can't really speak on everything too much, all the stories. If you could just maybe paint a picture of just what is the day-to-day like for an emergency medicine doc? I know it's just all over the place every day.
Yeah. The nice part of it is it's never the same day. And it's never the same hour. We joke in the ER often that say, oh, there'll be 3 cases today of whatever we see, or what will be the flavor of the day. But in reality, we see everything. And that's the part that excited me. You never know what's going to come through those doors. So the typical day, honestly, was just crazy. Now, with that said, the scientist in me found patterns. Nights and weekends was a different type of population than 5 in the morning on a Monday was a heart attack. You guys are going to laugh, but I actually did a research study that I should publish, but it was basically looking at ER flow and comparing it to football. And I actually was able to prove that during the football games of a certain city, so I was in Philadelphia at the time, that the ER volume would go down during the time that the Eagles were playing. And then I actually looked at the Cowboys, the same thing. And then if they were winning, it was longer, like patients wouldn't come in. But then and the ones that did were women and children. And then if the game was a blowout or they were getting killed, then we were starting to see patients sooner. And I remember literally during the Super Bowl talking to an individual and saying, hey, dude, why didn't you come in when the chest pain started? Dude, this is a Super Bowl. I was waiting for it to be done, and then I was going to come in. I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. That's the part of the ER. You just never know what you're going to see.
Yeah, totally. Something I heard from my parents as well, from their medical background, was for some reason there's a correlation with full moons and craziness happening as well. And I don't know what that is, but I remember hearing that you just never know what's going to happen those days.
That's interesting. Just going to comment real quick on that. There's supposedly some literature that disproves that, but
Oh,
anecdotally, when I'm working in the ER on full moons, I feel like we see more psych on full moon days. So I think there is a correlation personally.
there's got to be something to it.
And Harvey described yourself with octopus brain and like how the ER, the emergency room environment, you thrived there. and yet also you're a very successful entrepreneur. And it seems like some of that mindset has translated really well for you. It reminded me of a Harvard Business Review article that came out years ago that was looking at the different branches of the military and how if you were in the Marines, that you tend to do really well in entrepreneurship because you're having to respond to very fluid situations, versus if you were in the Navy, you did really well in corporate innovation groups where you need to have that rigid structure and discipline and following a process because you're dealing with much larger scope, but more narrowly constrained environments. And so it was interesting from that standpoint. And do you feel like maybe the different disciplines in healthcare for clinicians and physicians might tend towards different avenues for if you're like translating that outside of healthcare?
It's interesting you say that. I'm biased, obviously. I'm an ER doctor, so obviously my brain is wired in the ER. And I'm also biased by sample group. I spend more time with ER doctors than other populations. And not to promote it tomorrow, but tomorrow I am talking about entrepreneurship, genetic versus environment. And my point is this, I personally, again, biased information here, I feel like ER doctors tend to be more entrepreneurs because they're wired a certain way. They're risk takers. They love the adrenaline. They're okay with taking big loans. They're okay with taking risks that other specialties don't. With that said, you don't have to be an ER doctor to be an entrepreneur. But I've just noticed that correlation. You can make the argument that surgeons are the same in the sense that they're cutting and they're doing things. And then just that whole thing that you just said about the military, I do believe it. Each specialty attracts a certain specialty in that person. And that indirectly can correlate to business. But I know this is oversimplifying it. At the same time, it's important to note that each of us are different. So just because I'm an ER doc doesn't necessarily mean I may be an entrepreneur, because it just might be my personality. I just may have landed in that spot and that's not really my spot. So
yeah, it was a good nuanced answer there. So maybe there's some trends here potentially, but you don't want to overgeneralize.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to dive back into a little bit of your experience working in the ER. And as a physician, you're really impacting the lives of people on their worst days, a lot of times working in the ER. And what was it like the first time that you saved somebody's life and you actually got to go talk to that patient after the fact? Like, I know that I've had that experience when I almost died from sepsis after I had appendicitis when I was 15. And the surgeon told me I was like a couple hours away from possibly being critical. And it must be a very humanizing experience to go through that process of saving someone's life and then get to talk to them after, and they get to go and live their lives and get married, and just, I don't know, it just must be incredible to feel that feeling.
Yeah, I'll never forget the first time I was able to make a difference. Again, it sounds cliche-ish, but I became a doctor to that moment. I became a doctor to make that difference. And so the first time that I actually got to save someone's life, I just remember inside just being in tears thinking, wow, thank you, God, for giving me the tools to be that medium for you to help someone else. And it's a really humbling experience. And I try to make sure that I don't have a God complex ever, that it wasn't me that did it, that it just was, I had the tools and I studied and I was able to do it. And I was just a medium, because I see some doctors, unfortunately, getting that God complex. And I get it. But back to the question, it is an amazing feeling. The ability to talk to someone, to know that you were there for them, to be that hand that made that change. It's amazing because on both sides of the coin, that person's changed forever in a good way. And you as that person is also changed because you're touched by it. But just like mentioning the positive, unfortunately, seeing the negative is hard. It's hard emotionally as a human being to see someone suffer. And then especially in the ER, going into one room, knowing someone just died, and then going into another room that maybe someone's there just for med refill, and you're just having to act like nothing happened and have that emotional intelligence to give that person your all still, yet knowing that someone just died and then you're seeing their family grieving. It's a tough pill.
This is a really interesting question we just got. So it's from Joseph Arrington, and it says, I'm an entrepreneur who is career changing to become a physician en route to emergency medicine too. Any advice for how to juggle his entrepreneurial desires during the rigors of medical school and residency, or maybe some advice on how to avoid the stigma of avoiding the culture of some of the field and seeing them as only a trainee and wanting to be more than that?
So on the entrepreneur side, juggling, I think you're born with it in some extent. You have it in you. it's just a matter of like medicine, you're just growing and flourishing it. So I think our educational system sometimes will squash certain things out of us. And my encouragement to you is just like you became a leader in medicine in the sense that you said, you know what, I'm going to study my butt off to become a doctor and I'm going to be the best I can. I would encourage others to do the same. Make entrepreneurship just like medicine, just another passion that it's not just a one time, it's life learning. And so on the entrepreneur side, it's all about thinking outside the box. Obviously, being here today says a lot about you because you're wanting to learn. You're taking time out of other things that have attention and you're spending it here. So I encourage you to do that, read, listen to podcasts, follow some really good entrepreneurs and just see what they have to say. And then obviously there's two ways of learning. There's the hard way and the easy way. Learn as much as you can the easy way, meaning just learn up on books and everything else, because later in life, you're going to have to do things and you may make some mistakes, and that'll be the hard lessons in life.
And just to circle back to the stigma of being an entrepreneur in healthcare, did you experience that where like I'm sure you're constantly coming up with ideas. I can just see it in your personality. How did the culture respond to your personality, particularly as you're going through med school and residency?
I love that question. And I'm glad for bringing it up because I didn't finish that part of your thank you. I laugh because at one point when the first iPhone came out, I went crazy and I made 30 apps and I grew it and I was in the top 10 apps in the world for medicine. And the first one was called IV Meds, but I was labeled as the app guy. And I wasn't labeled Dr. Castro. I was labeled, oh, there's the app guy. And then later I started helping out with TV and helping out with the news. And nobody wanted to be present when it came to doing stuff for the hospital. And I was like, I'll do it. I don't care. And pretty quickly I became not Dr. Castro again. I was like, oh, there's the news guy. And I'm like, no, I'm Dr. Castro here. But no, I got labeled as the app guy, the TV guy, the media guy, everything but medicine. And at times it was a hard pill because I thought, man, I'm a doctor at heart. That's what I do every day. But, that stigma, as I get older, the more I'm like, and it's true, the older you get, the more you start not caring what others think about you. And I know that sounds horrible, but it's true. We talk to the elderly, someone in their 80s, and the stuff they say, you're like, holy cow, I would never say that. But who knows, maybe when you're 80, 90, you get the right to say that.
I've heard a few of those from my grandparents as well. Sticking onto the entrepreneur side, you're a very experienced entrepreneur, and I know you've been a businessman since you were a teenager selling vitamins. And you had the entrepreneur hustle from a very early age. Do you feel like the transition to emergency medicine and then still being in business, was it difficult for you? Because you were always hustling basically your whole life.
Honestly, and again, and I'm going back to that first question. I try not to take it to heart, but I know sometimes when I would talk to different leaders, they're like, man, you're everything but a doctor. And I get insulted by it. But I think it's because I've done so many other things, that side hustle or doing. Yes, that was my first big business, but my very first business had a paper route for this company called the New York Times. And I literally got a few extra newspapers every day. And before school, I would go to the subway system. And if I remember it was 35 cents a newspaper, I would sell them for a quarter. And I would New York Times would probably cringe that I did this, but I was like, I need extra cash. And that was an easy couple of bucks every day that I could make. And transitioning into the ER and having that entrepreneur spirit at times has been hard. But the more I've grown, the more I understand, the more I think I'm able to help. And if anything, I've converted it to, here's my brain for emergency medicine and medicine. Here's my brain for business. Why not combine the two and create a new product and a new way of thinking outside the box or new angle, to the point where when I'm in front of the C-suite, they look at me, they're like, huh, you're not Dr. Castro. You are Dr. Castro plus / MBA. You have both. And I see it. And so I feel like that is what I offer, and that's how I see the world, and I'm doing things differently. I'm honored and happy to be with a company that I'm the chief clinical operating officer called Vital Health. And the skinny is I'm able to use my business / MD degree to do things a little different, to push the envelope, to do things that maybe the traditional doctor wouldn't see that way.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And some people, I would say, they see the results, folks like yourself, and they're drawn to the entrepreneur path. They're not really always aware of what it takes to really actually make it. And so I'm curious of, what would you say some of the hidden costs to being a successful entrepreneur that people probably overlook because they just see the success. They see you on podcasts, they see you on TV.
Yeah, it's a hard pill. I know personally I have gained weight the last few months, and my health to some degree is suffering because it's hard to balance. And so I'm constantly reminding myself, okay, I need to make sure that today I spend time with my sons, my girls, my wife, that I'm carving out time, that I make sure that it's not just a 1 hour a week, that it's a daily event. Because as an entrepreneur, it's really hard to put your heart, mind, and soul into something and your passion. And then sometimes inadvertently, you're neglecting what really matters. And it's your family and the ones around you, the ones that are supporting you, your cheerleading team behind you. And so I'm humbled every day saying, okay, yes, I wrote this book. Yes, I made this, but did I fail as a father? Did I fail as a husband? You know, those to me, the older I get, the more I realize that's really what matters. When I pass away one day, my tombstone will be my family around it, not my LinkedIn followers. It'll be the ones that were there with me in the voyage.
That's the truth. Still sticking on entrepreneurship, and you talked about risk appetite a little bit earlier. Aspiring entrepreneurs are sometimes afraid of risk, which kind of ends up holding them back. They decide, I don't know if I should do this. And at what point in your life did you really accept risk as just part of the journey, become friends with it, and just start to overcome it and excel through it?
Unfortunately, I think it may be good or bad. I think I overdid it with the risk. I think I just went all in and risk and failed left and right and made mistakes left and right and lost tons of money and fell on my face. But the smartest thing I did was every time I fell, I learned from my mistakes and I saw how I could avoid that mistake. And instead of it taking me a year to turn a company around, I was able to do it pretty quickly because I already learned from all my mistakes. And so my advice to others is on the risk side is twofold. One, it's okay to fail. It's just not okay not to learn from your failures. Number two, as you're going through business, it's important to find your work wife or work husband, depending on your gender, because you need to have that person to complement you. The last thing you want is someone that's just like you. You need to find someone that is opposite in the sense that they complement the skills that you lack. So if you're a risk taker, then I would encourage you to find someone that's not a risk taker so that you guys could sit at the table and discuss why one or the other. Because I think personally, the magic number is 2, personally. So no disrespect to companies that have 5 or 20 leaders. I think the key number is 2, because then between the 2 of you, you will see both sides if you pick your partner right. The worst partner, in my opinion, would be the one that is just like you, because then it gets to the point where you're both looking at everything and everything's a yes and let's go. And you're both making the same mistake. And in reality, you need someone to complement you.
100%. I've often, as we work with different startup clients, is like my shorthand is, okay, you're no, and that person's yes. As long as we've got yes and no on the same team, then there can be a constructive dialogue. Or in traction, they talk about visionaries and integrators, right? That the visionary is the one who has 10 ideas in a week. One of them might actually be the breakthrough that saves the company, but it's the integrator who helps buffer the rest of the team from getting whiplash, because the visionary is shifting back and forth, and the integrator is the one who's providing stability and structure. And no, we shouldn't go off that cliff again. You already learned that lesson.
Yeah. And I chuckle because I tend to be the visionary that loves, literally, my brain doesn't stop. Literally, I have to watch movies sometimes to take my brain on hold for a minute because I'm just constantly going. And even depending on the movie that I pick, I'm like, ooh, that's a good idea. Maybe I should do this. I chuckle because as the older I get, I'm trying to convert myself to some degree to be more of a hybrid, that person that can have the vision, but that person that can execute. So that way I offer more, and that way I'm self-putting the brakes on myself so that I know that, okay, I can't do it all. I need to focus here. And so that's why I'm enjoying right now being a consultant for different companies, because it gives me a platform to sit down and look at their problem. And I don't run it, I don't own it. I'm just there to advise. And it's almost more fun because I don't have the stress. I just give my 2 cents and help them out.
Something that you touched on as well is just failure in general, failure in business. It happens to everybody. If you've been in the game long enough, it's going to be there. And I think people deal with it differently. And so how did you learn to make it so constructive to where it ends up being a net positive in the long run for you? Because I know a lot of people that fall flat on their face, and especially if they haven't experienced it before, they don't even know how to deal with it. They just think I'm a failure. They take it personally.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of having a strong why in my life, having that ammunition behind me to just continue to push me to go forward. The other part of it is I get this a lot. People are like, gosh, Harvey, you're always smiling. You're always happy. And I'm like, I'm not on any happy pill. I'm not taking any drugs. I'm not on anything. That's just my personality. And I think that carries into the workforce and entrepreneurship. I can't quote studies like Ty over here, but I know I do remember reading that positive leaders tend to have better outcomes in their CEO companies because the CEO is positive, they're thinking, they're optimistic, and that rolls into the company. And I feel that's happening with me. I think I'm so optimistic that even when I know I'm going against Goliath here, or something crazy, I feel like I can do it. I don't know if my mom did a good job brainwashing me, because at a young age, she's like, hey, if you want to be a doctor, if you want to be the president of the United States, you can do it. And I believed it, and I still do. And so I don't know if that fantasy world is translating into the entrepreneurship spirit that I feel like I can't fail. It's just a matter of execution and doing it right based on my failures in the past.
That's really interesting. That's a really cool way to look at it. I try to find myself trying to make myself positive when you are facing adversity as well. It's very difficult. That's a really hard muscle to train.
But I think when you come from very little and you get pushed and you come from nothing, and then also being in the ER and seeing people die and going through this horrible experience, I think, not make it light, but then when I see a financial sheet and it's not going well, it's no one died on this financial sheet. No one got hurt. Yes, we're not making money. So then it makes it harder for me to look at it negative. It makes me compare it to something else and say, you know what, we're going to change this around. We're going to work on this. And anyway, sorry to interrupt, but keep going. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, absolutely. Context is everything. And so still we're wrapping up the entrepreneur side of things here, but I'm really curious of what would you say are some of the traits that make physicians particularly well suited for entrepreneurship? Because what we have seen with entrepreneur founders like yourself, and I see Rajiv is here as well, is you're stretched for time. You're busy as heck. A lot of practicing physicians are working 60, 70 plus hour weeks, and they're still innovating something. They're trying to run a business. And so what do you think some of those traits that just help you guys push over the top?
I think, and I know I sound like a broken record, I think it goes back to a lot of why did you become a doctor? What was the ammunition that got you there? And I think that mindset, because think about it, to get to that point, you had to do well in school, you had to be consistent, you had to take tests, you had to go through an interview, you had to go through all these steps, and then you had to go through medical school, which is a bunch of other tests, and then residency. And then by the time you're out, you've pretty much killed it in your field. But my point is this, it's not that you're a doctor that made you successful, is that you learned the process of learning that made you successful. And going back to my broken record is having that strong why to channel into and say, I became a doctor because of X, to take that energy and that X into that entrepreneur spirit. Because guess what? You've had a whole lifespan of learning health, but you really haven't learned business. And so it's taking that tool, that ammunition, that wet behind the ears of not knowing business, to focus and use those tools that made you successful, that got you those initials of becoming a doctor, to use that as energy in your why and the tools to success. So it's not necessarily the doctor, but it's the process of becoming a doctor.
Yeah, it's that sort of overcoming a hill and a mountain that not many do, right? Or not many of us have in us. And switching now to the technology side of things, a huge portion of your work focuses on the impact and implementation of technology for the betterment of healthcare or for patient care. And when did you really start to grow an affinity to the technology side, and what really pushed you to lean into it?
I feel blessed. I'm going to date myself. During my training, Dr. Google was a thing, and it was a new thing. And back then it was a big deal to have a Palm Pilot, to have this technology that has a peripheral brain to help you. And I'm a dude, I love gadgets. My wife wants to kill me because I always want to have the latest toy and everything. And that's just probably my personal addiction. But with that said, I think the moment that it really just came to heart was when I realized how much technology is helping people, how much technology can really, if it's used correctly, can educate our patients, can help our workday, can reduce physician burnout. And I thought, this is a good tool because now I can do more and I can give better care for my patients. And then to drive the example, I was in the emergency room. Literally, the first iPhone had just come out. I'm coding a patient. I tell the nurse, hey, start a drip. And she says 1 minute, she gets a textbook, she goes to the table of contents, she's flipping through, finds the drugs, finds the exact dose, goes, gets the meds, and starts. And I'm freaking out thinking, I just had graduated from residency. I'm thinking, there's got to be a faster way. This is taking too long. I know some nurses memorize a lot of the drips, but this particular nurse didn't and wanted to verify. And a lot of them want to verify as well. And so I literally thought, what if I create an IV med app that you click, in 3 clicks, you have the dose and ready to go and you're done. And that's what I did. So fast forward, I'm playing with OpenAI's ChatGPT December 1st, and I'm looking at it thinking, oh my gosh, this is the next iPhone, but I think this is going to be more powerful. There's going to be more uses. And I literally told my wife, hey, I'm writing a book on ChatGPT. And she's, what is that? What are you talking about? And so I wrote it and I wasn't really happy with it. And I was like, you know what? It's okay. It's not my best work. I know it's not the best, but I still want to get this out there because I want to do a public service announcement. I want to help patients. I want to tell doctors. I knew I was going to get slack for it because people were like, this is a horrible book. But I thought, you know what? It's 10,000 feet high. My goal is to educate. And since then, I'm trying my best to make each book better and better. But I can honestly say I was the first doctor out there to take it to that level. And then every book that I've done since is actually taking it to another level that doesn't exist. Still, I can still claim, hey, I'm using ChatGPT faster in a way that no one else is using. Now, fast forward a couple months from now, I'm sure there'll be companies with apps doing what I'm doing, but I can honestly say I was the first.
It was so cool. It blew my hair back to see you be able to publish that quickly. And I don't have a copy of the book with me here, but I was an early fan and enjoyed going through it. And I found some tips and tricks in there, new tools that all of a sudden I'm text messaging with an AI because of you just text this phone number and find out what happens. So I did that prompt and holy
yeah.
Okay, I guess we can swear on this podcast, but it was an amazing experience. And a lot of it was just you being at the tip of the spear, really starting to uncover a lot of these technologies and tools that haven't hit the mainstream yet. And it's just neat to see that you're just taking that octopus brain and putting it into these books and getting them out there. Me personally, having started and worked on different books and just never quite had the courage to just publish and get it out there. I admire what you're able to do just to get this pushed out in very topical conversations.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Not sometimes, I take things to heart. And so when I see a bad review or I see someone saying negative, it's hard because I take it personal because I'm trying my best to do my best. I know that isn't my best. So then I take it with a grain of salt because I'm like, yeah, I guess if I stopped everything and I just 100% just poured into this for a year, I could have an amazing product, but by then the technology would have changed and things have happened. And so I thought, well, there's a risk versus reward and there's a give and take. I'm trying my best. And as I become better, I'm going to put out better stuff. But at the same time, I think there is something like to Ty, he loves reading books, to just do a small book in the bones of it to get the understanding. Because again, to your point, you don't have to write 1,000 pages to get maybe 10 pages across. So maybe better to write 50 pages and it have the bones to someone like you that's going through, oh, this is a good idea. Oh, this is a good idea. And then now you're sparking a conversation. And that's my whole goal.
Yeah, such a great use case for that. And of course, you could see moments in where like ChatGPT inspired the book. And so I think for any other topic, maybe that wouldn't work as well. But the fact that you were using the tool to like help to spur your thinking. And then I think we're all figuring out what are the implications of this new technology, because for anybody who started to play with it, it's mind blowing what it can do and then what it can't do. And we're all trying to figure out what the limitations are and the kind of the broader context for society of how we integrate this. So the topic is, of course, is ChatGPT and healthcare, and you're seeing GPT-4 come out. Are you still optimistic about where this technology is going? Because I think we all are having that moment where this is the best thing ever. It's too good. What are the like runaway use cases for this where I'm a little scared now, but I'm curious. I just raised a can of worms there.
So take another deep breath there on that one. I feel like the following. Yes, on the ethical side, on the bias side, there's a lot of things that people need to be aware. Obviously, ChatGPT is only as good as the input that it was put in. And so if you are out in West Africa and you're asking about certain particular healthcare that's particular to West Africa, ChatGPT may not have it in the sense that it hasn't been studied and the databases that are out there, research dollars behind it hasn't been placed, and therefore indirectly it wasn't added to the database. So when you ask ChatGPT, it's giving you the generic answer that someone unknowing that bias may say, oh, this applies to me, and in reality it doesn't. The other danger I always talk about and worry is in third world countries or countries that you can go to the pharmacy and just pick up any drug. I worry because people will go in and self-diagnose and then go into the pharmacy and take a drug that A, they may not need, B, they may kill themselves or hurt themselves, or C, just been told they have this horrible diagnosis and horrible emotional intelligence to the point where they're like depressed or suicidal. In reality, they don't. And so I worry about technology going down that path. As far as the optimism, man, I'm like a little kid when it comes to this thing. I think it's amazing. And I know there's a lot of naysayers thinking, oh my gosh, it's going to take my job. The whole world is going to crumble now because of this. And I see that side of it. My famous statement that I say over and over is ChatGPT is not going to take your job, but not using ChatGPT is going to take your job. And so there's going to be other people out there that are going to take this tool, use it, become very efficient, do more. And then me as an employer are going to look back and say, ooh, this person's killing it. They're doing so much more than this other person, but they both have the same degree, yet this one over here is being more productive. You know what? I'm going to hire this guy over here, or girl, woman, because they're killing it. And so I really believe that's the case.
So if you had a use case, and actually this was one of the use cases I was thoroughly entertained by, where this popped up on Twitter, which is you can assign it like a system command to adopt a certain persona. And my favorite one was that, hey, you are now Hustle GPT. I want you to give me instructions for how to set up and run a business. Here's my parameters. I only have $5,000. Help me understand how best to do my next step. And you look at the difference between GPT-3, and it's like a mediocre MBA student giving you the answers. GPT-4 is proposing new things that I'm impressed by, which it's fascinating from like a reasoning standpoint. But then when you get to any kind of financial analysis, it just crumbles. Yeah, no, you tell me the answer. I can't do that. So it's interesting to see where its gaps are.
I personally use it as a brainstorming session. I know that sounds weird. I know we talk about having a mentor, having someone to teach you. I feel like I've had enough good, bad, the ugly in life that I know when ChatGPT is hallucinating, or I feel like I know that the information coming out is not correct. I could be wrong. Again, that's one of the issues, that it can tell you half truth and it's actually wrong, but you believe it. And so my point with the brainstorming session, I'm loving it because I'm using it as a peripheral brain to augment my creativity. I'm not saying, hey, ChatGPT, here, go, tell me what to do. I'm doing the opposite. I'm like guiding it, prompting it, giving it background, pushing it certain angles, and creating new products in that way. And I'm having a lot of fun. And I encourage people just to play with it. Just like the 10,000 hour rule out there, that the more you spend, the more you become an expert. Same thing. The more time you spend on certain technology, the more you know the good, the bad, the ugly, and the more you'll be successful at that tool.
Yeah, I've been having fun just mentally anthropomorphizing ChatGPT as a liar and a sociopath, but a useful liar and a sociopath. So as long as they're having to manually code in the ethics into it, can define those parameters. And then that's where I think that interesting ethics discussion comes in, is how do we co-create and define those boundaries? Because if you listen to the podcast with Sam Altman on the Lex Fridman podcast, he talked about how they're iterating and having this as a public discussion, and they're reacting to the use cases that are being proposed. And that's where I made a comment that I think that physicians are uniquely positioned to help define that, because they're really should be the gatekeepers by which patients are did with this AI, that it's influencing healthcare, and that it's these ethical decisions, we shouldn't be taking a backseat to it, but rather that, like Harvey, you and your colleagues should be helping to shape this. And I'm so glad you're taking a leadership role in that.
I appreciate you saying that. Honestly, that was my main goal with ChatGPT in healthcare. It wasn't a business mind behind it. Honestly, it was a public service announcement. In my brain, I thought, at the end of the day, someone's got to drive this ship. It's going to be either corporate America driving the ship, Microsoft that owns 49% of this, or it's going to be administrators, doctors in healthcare that have a true passion for healthcare. And they're going to be the ones that are going to say, no, we're not using that technology this way. We're going to use it this other way. And we're going to promote it. And so when it comes to corporations saying, no, we're not using this, then it's going to be the doctors, healthcare providers, patients that are going to wave the flag saying, no, this is how it's going to be done. And my big picture of helping people, I thought, if I can help drive price of healthcare down, if I can make the quality of healthcare go up, obviously it's not me, but if I can help propose and train the future doctors and doctors that are out there and patients, then I'm actually helping society. Now, am I personally profiting from it? No, book sales, it's not like this is making my breakfast every day or dinner. It's not. But my goal is not that. My goal is honestly, how can we help? And that's why I take time to do these podcasts to help, because I want to inspire someone out there that's listening that says, you know what? I am the hospital administrator. You know what? I don't own XY, but I'm inspired to do this, and I'm going to create a better product. And who knows, maybe your product that we're talking about today is going to actually help me when I'm old or when I need it.
I sure hope so. Dr. Raji Akile, nice to see you here. He had some really interesting comments, and he's basically commenting on the post that you made earlier today from all those innovators basically saying we need to halt work on AI, that GPT-5. We don't even understand the implications of GPT-4. And is that a sentiment you agree with? Do you think that society needs to figure it out first before we even advance it farther?
Fortunately, that can of worms has been opened, and it's not going to be stopped unless someone else stops. And so to my earlier point, we need leaders out there to push that ship and to protect us and guide it. I don't believe in halting personally the AI in any way. I see it more as if there is the unknown. All of us don't like the unknown. We want to be educated on it. And so I think it's a twofold answer. One, there's got to be individuals like myself that are out there educating others on the good, the bad, the ugly. And then the ugly and the bad, we need to legislate possibly, or we need to fix or address. Or in my opinion, to Todd's point, ChatGPT 3 or 3.5 verse 4, it's different in the sense in a good way. It actually has higher USMLE scores on 4. And so in theory, you could argue that progressing 5 might be better than 4, and it may help. Now, as far as legislation and all that stuff, I think it needs to happen to some degree, but not to the degree where we're going to halt anything. I just think we need to be responsible. And again, I think it's the unknown. With that said, I always question people in the sense if they want to pause. I'm playing devil's advocate here when I say this. Do they want to pause so that they have 6 months to catch up, or do they want to pause to actually help? And I'm just going to plant that seed.
It's interesting. Yeah, maybe they're threatened to some degree as well. Their business models are going to get upended. Who knows? So speaking of business, we have 15 minutes left, and we have a lot of good questions to get to, but I do understand that you have an upcoming book coming out on AI and entrepreneurship. And maybe if you could just talk to us a little bit about what inspired the book, what's it called, what are people going to learn, what impact are you hoping that it's going to have?
Yeah. So I got blessed in that just by coincidence, the book got released completely last night. The book is called The AI-Driven Entrepreneur, Unleashing the Power of Artificial Intelligence for Business Success by Harvey Castro and with ChatGPT 4. And I know people are like, holy cow, ChatGPT wrote, oh, there it is. Thank you for your support.
Thanks for the tip. Was able to download it last night. Yep.
Cool. So yeah, I'm like a little kid. I saw it on Amazon as an ebook, and I was like texting Ty. I was like, check this out. It's cool. But I figure if I'm gonna, talk the talk, I need to walk the talk or whatever. I figure, you know what? If I'm advocating for AI, then I need to use AI to help me write the book, to help me brainstorm, to help me create it. And so not that the whole book is written by it, I guided it, I use my creativity, I use my experience, my background. And then I came to the quandrum, do I make this a 100-page book, or do I create a very short book, or do I make it like an encyclopedia? And I know personally, I've read so many books that I'm like, man, this thing could have been Cliff Notes. So I thought, let me create a quick intro to all these things to plant the seed, because I feel like a lot of people already know a lot of this stuff, but then it's good review. And I divided the book up into just phases: entrepreneurship, just basics, and then more advanced, and then using AI, and then just 10,000 feet high because I feel like it's the creativity of all of us that really makes us successful. And I created a podcast called GPT Podcast, and it's all AI driven, which is crazy, but it's basically my voice synthesized. And I go through different lessons and I put it in there, and the AI creates this conversation with my business partner and I. We have this total conversation, but it's all AI generated and it's all driven by what we put in it. So it's crazy, but I thought this is cool. If I'm going to, again, promote this, then I need to use this.
Wait, hold on. That's wild. When is the podcast dropping? Yeah.
Oh, it's out. Yeah, it's out. We have 4 or 5. I don't know. I can't keep track, but we have several episodes. So if you go to thegptpodcast.com, I took a Bill Gates blog that he just put out and I put it into ChatGPT, made a summary, and then my business partner and I have a conversation based on that blog, and you can listen to it. It's crazy.
That is crazy. That's hard to wrap my head around.
I'm gonna have to check this out. This is awesome. Make sure you drop a link into the show
So
notes.
we have several episodes coming, and it's in the book at the back, but then obviously go to my LinkedIn and it's on there. But it's, again, I feel like if I'm doing this kind of stuff, I really need to use it and show proof of concept and see how it's done and explain and educate. That way we all win here.
Absolutely. And I know you mentioned that the book is dedicated to your son as well, if you wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, I'm going to have to get my son Zachary to listen to this part of the show, or the whole show. Growing up, I didn't have a father. It was my mom, and I love her to death. She's alive. She's both my mother and dad and mentor, my first mentor. And with that said, she gave me the tools to success. And I thought I'd be a horrible parent if I don't give those tools that I have learned and gifts to my own children. And so I tell the story of, I know this sounds a little geekish. My first son, I would have him on my lap and we would look at stocks, and he was 5, and I would have him interpret candlesticks. And is the market going up or down? Is it time to sell or buy? And with time, at 5, he was telling me, yeah, it looks like we need to sell, or it looks like we need to buy. And I'm not sure about this graph. And he was actually right on all of it because I trained him, I taught him. I know it sounds geekish, but then I thought, let me be the fun dad. So we would go on road trips. And I'd say, okay, guys, look out the window, tell me a business. And they would say, oh, there's a gas station. I'm like, okay, guys, how can we make that gas station more money? And we'd go over supply and demand, but I'd make it really fun. I didn't go over I never said supply and demand. I never said rich dad, poor dad. I'd always talk about passive income, but explain that in other words. And then growing up, my second son and first, they really love business. But my second to me, feels like he's more like me. And so I dedicate this book because he wants to be an entrepreneur. He's 19 and he's talking about passive income and different business ideas. And obviously he's still a teenager at heart, but he's got a brain in him that I think he is going to be a mini me in the future. He will be that person. And so I wanted him to dedicate this book as he reads through to inspire him to continue doing what he's doing. He's actually majoring in entrepreneurship.
That's incredible. The next generation, man, is on the way.
We need somebody to take care of us.
Right, exactly.
Getting younger.
Yeah, so we do have a couple more questions from folks that are coming in, and so maybe we could touch on these a little bit. And so one of them is, what are your thoughts regarding the present status of change management and stakeholder engagement related to AI in healthcare, and maybe what could be improved?
I'm reading the question too. I think the change in management stakeholders is a little tough. Again, I'm going to generalize when I make this statement. I feel like certain people learn to do business a certain way and they stick hard to doing business a certain way. And unfortunately, that's been good for them in a way because it's made them successful, but times are changing. And I truly believe that if you don't change with times or look at business a little tad differently, you're going to inevitably be closed. You're going to be the next Blockbuster that had $1 million idea that no longer exists, and you're dominated by Netflix. And so as far as engagement in the management field, I would highly encourage using this technology in healthcare. But the problem is healthcare is not marketing. Healthcare has to do with people's lives. There's HIPAA, there's privacy laws all over the world. So we can't just jump into this technology. And there's obviously ethics we've talked about and bias, and there's errors. And I agree and I get it. But I think the goal is, what can we do today to help our patients that maybe we don't have to worry about HIPAA? And let me explain, because that sounds horrible, but meaning maybe we use ChatGPT to help build your website, to educate your patients. Maybe we use ChatGPT to create a database on a particular disease. And then you, the doctor that is a specialist in that disease, you bless that information. And now you're using it in your marketing, you're using it in your website, you're using it to educate and improve your patients. The next level that I see, I love this example. It makes me excited. So a company in England, and I'll make it short, it's a hospital. They basically took asthma discharge instructions. They put it to size point into a fifth grader's level and changed the discharge instruction to speak as if it was a fifth grader. Then they used Dolly that made a coloring book. They put it all together, handed it to the fifth grader and said, you have asthma and these are discharge instructions. And now the kid can color. I think it was 5 years old, my bad, not fifth grade, 5 years old, can color, ask questions. Now they're taking it to their level, they're understanding, they comply with the medicine, they comply with their disease process. Now they're taking it to another level. That to me is ChatGPT healthcare. That to me is helping technology, taking it to the next level. It's not a threat. You're not going to lose your job. You're actually helping someone. You're making a better product. And that's how I see ChatGPT being used.
That's such a great use case and example, because I think you have that burden of knowledge of the words you think about in healthcare, which can be, in some cases, like hard for somebody with a fifth grade education to even comprehend the words that are being said, but rather using stories, using analogies, and using the creativity of the model to help distill down and have that as a benchmark for this has to relate to a 5-year-old. And that's something that seems like the generative large language models seem to excel at, provided there's somebody also gut checking and saying, maybe I wouldn't use that analogy, but this analogy you proposed might be a better one. It's that curation instead of having to be like the 100% creator.
Yeah. And I know we only got 4 minutes because I do have a hard stop coming. So I'd love to answer whatever else questions you have.
Yeah. How do you convince your fellow healthcare professionals who are totally skeptical and cynical about AI in healthcare? How do you make the case for it?
To me, I love education. I fall back to education. And I think, honestly, a lot of problems in life can be just fixed with education. And so I would talk to them and ask them what scares you about it? What don't you like? What is it? What do you object? And then attack those in a positive way. And if you need to, use ChatGPT to help you with the argument back. And obviously, a lot of it is the unknown. And if you uncover the unknown and really make it known and then use applications like the ones I just gave, then it becomes an easier pill to swallow. Then they see the bigger picture and they're more likely to do it. With that said, you need to back 10,000 feet and say, okay, is this person born in the 60s, born in the 70s? Because I know you chuckle, but it's going to influence the way they see life, the way they accept technology. Maybe they were burned personally. So then I would take it to another level and see what is it that scares them and then go from that point.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And then I think just wrapping up here, first and foremost, just thank you so much for sharing all your insights and experiences with us. And just what is some advice that you have to physician entrepreneurs that are earlier in their career than you, but they want the success that you've had?
I tell my kids the same thing. I want you to learn the easy way. Go through texts, go through positive leaders, go through TED Talks, educate yourself. But unfortunately, I know the truth is you're going to have to fall on your face, unfortunately, on some things. And that's the only way you're going to learn. But hopefully that's not the case. My advice is just keep buffing up on these things. And we mentioned earlier, having that work husband or work spouse equivalent to help you to see things a little differently. I think it's important. I would highly encourage you. And even if you're not opening up a business today, just having that growth, obviously I'm going to be biased and say, follow me on LinkedIn, learn more from all of us, but Ty and everybody on this panel, and even the people I'm looking on the comments attendees, they're all great leaders. So just latch onto someone and learn.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And Dr. Harvey Castro, thank you for your time today. Thank you for being a leader in the space. We need more leaders like you out there. And for everybody that, joined us today and we didn't get to answer your question, Dr. Castro, he's there on LinkedIn. You can ask him these questions. He's fielding questions all day over there. And also we'll be linking his book, The AI Driven Entrepreneur, when we post this as well later this week. Look for that. And just thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. And I hope everyone has a blessed day and give your loved ones a hug today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Castro.